When I first started this investigation, I thought what I would do is try to restore sense and order to the mainstream conversation. I wanted to find the truth that could unite us all. But what I'm beginning to learn is that I'm not sure we're ever going back. I'm not sure that we will ever have one shared reality ever again. And that's because this is a story of multiple realities, multiple truth systems, causing a fundamental divergence in a variety of subspaces of the social megaspace. And there's no longer any criteria or mechanism for making them reckon with each other. And the people that are tooling your truth system and your reality, you might think that they're opposed to the mainstream. But mostly the mainstream is a fiction that all of the different pill producers invoke strategically to secure their dominion in ever-diverging, irreconcilable paths. We have crossed the Rubicon, people. So far, we've uncovered some highly dubious connections, let's say, and that's being generous, I think, between some reactionary political theorists and some very mainstream progressive journalists. So we're trying to understand what's really going on here. Now, in the last chapter, I discussed my hypothesis at the end that, as far as I can see, my best guess at the time was that the computer scientist Moldbug might be at the apex of some kind of extremely dangerous plot. And I thought this because he, on the one hand, is a genius for sure. He's also one of the most evil writers in all of history. So when you combine that with the fact that he knows Bronze Age Pervert personally, and he appears to have hyperstitioned Rosie Gray into the spot of White House correspondent for The Atlantic, something I demonstrated, I think, quite conclusively in the previous chapter. You know, when you take all of these things together, and also that his writings reveal an extraordinary command of mental virus engineering, something he's very interested in and has studied deeply. So what I've done between then and now is I set out to reverse engineer Moldbug's plot, basically by studying his writings. After reading all of his writings about 3 times, I hypothesized a model, and then I sought out to test it scientifically. What I originally thought was wrong, it's turned out, but only slightly. I am now nearly certain about what is truly happening. I was right that we are, I think, looking at a profound type of viral epidemic engineered by a genius. And Moldbug is very close to the apex. But through Moldbug's writings, I discovered he's not actually at the apex. There is someone above Moldbug that I've deduced from a close reading of Moldbug's writings. Now, unless future information arrives to somehow falsify the explanation that I'm about to put forward, as far as I can see at this present moment, I think this will be the final and concluding chapter that basically summarizes in undeniable, rigorous logic what the frick is going on here with society as a whole, really. It's as if, coming to understand one blade of grass, we will have come to understand the entire universe. For Moldbug, all of contemporary society as we know it, basically liberal democracy and everything that the normal person in a Western society thinks is good and true, it's all due to the Protestant deviation from the truth. Moldbug claims that he is an atheist, but he loves the royal Stuarts, and they were Catholic. So he might really feel that he is an atheist, but in an indirect way, we can see from this flowchart I've made that he is a follower of the Catholic God. Also, Moldbug identifies as a Jacobite, and his proposed political model is called Patchwork. Patchwork is basically where many corporations own territories, and those corporations are called governments, and the people who live on those territories are paying customers to the governments. Now, what is Jacobitism? Jacobitism basically means that you live in the Highlands of Scotland and wage guerrilla warfare on the Protestant usurpers. in order to restore the Stuarts and the glory of the one true Catholic God. Now, Moldbug doesn't live in Scotland, so there's some sort of metaphor here that we have to figure out. Interestingly, the Jacobite leaders, they typically distance themselves from the actual fighting for strategic reasons. Anyway, that's a quick summary of Moldbug's theory of history and his own vision for the future. Most people think of the left and the right as opposing teams, but what Moldbug is really trying to argue is that they are kind of two sides of the same team. They're infected with the same virus, but two different strains of that virus. As we have already seen, the best name for that virus is just Protestantism. Moldbug's idea is that there are different institutions for propagating these two different strains of the Protestant virus. Basically what you have in mind of when you think of left-wing news and right-wing news. And they propagate these viruses to different social institutions and political institutions. And the ones that get virus X are adored by conservative people, virus X zombies, let's call them. And the progressive welfare state institutions are adored by virus Y zombies, or just normal progressive people. In this sense, the left and the right are two different teams, but they're both basically feeding into each other and constituting a shared circuit. So if somebody wanted to hack this system, how would you do it? Well, it's very difficult because, as we've seen, it's a very self-reinforcing system. But we have some clues because Moldbug actually analyzes this. One thing he says is that you certainly wouldn't try to do it through the low status route. In other words, conservatism. You wouldn't do it through something like Fox News because all the people who think like conservatives are basically seen as kind of dumb, backwards townies. Now, you would be more inclined to sneak in through progressivism because it's higher status. However, Patchwork is very not progressive. So what do you do? One thing this model shows us is that you probably would want to start with the media, because according to Moldbug, that's where the causal chain begins. But you can't just feed progressive journalists the idea that Patchwork is really great, because they won't buy that. They won't repeat that. You have to feed them something that they will eat, but which then produces consequences that they would not have intended had they known what was going on consciously. I would argue that what you would probably want to do is create what I call HyperX decoy memes. In other words, exaggerated kind of cartoon images of evil right-wing figures that terrify the irrational, unconscious motivations of progressive journalists and are highly sensational to read, so people will pay for that kind of journalism. But because they're exaggerated and fundamentally disconnected from reality, propagating those memes through the system will have a tendency to overheat as everyone becomes increasingly detached from reality without any way to settle disagreements or reconverge on a shared reality. The only solution will be for ideological camps and then ideological subcamps for everyone to basically branch off into their own different forms of reality. In other words, reality patchwork. Okay, but is this true or false? Maybe I'm just getting carried away in my own imagination. To see if this is actually happening or not, we need to test this empirically in a scientific fashion. So I spent a lot of time digging up data to try and compare my hypothesis to what we're observing in the world. I conducted a bunch of extremely scientific studies. Most of you are probably a little too stupid to understand, no offense, but I mean, let's be real. Just trust me, it was extremely scientific, highly robust, everything that I did. And I actually was able to find substantial overlap among the followers of Tara Burton, Bronze Age Pervert, and Rosie Gray. Moldbug's not on Twitter. Remember I said that the Jacobite leaders don't get involved in the actual fighting. I found 12 individuals who follow all 3 of those accounts. I then investigated which ones were active members of the progressive or cathedral intelligentsia. Strangely enough, they were all women. I mean, as a good male academic feminist, I completely support this development, but it is kind of striking, isn't it? Jeremy Russell is clearly a sock puppet of this guy, Philippe, but men are no longer entitled to be the star of every film. There was also this guy, but I doubt he's the culprit. Is that racist? I don't know. So basically, HyperX decoy memes, such as the writings of Bronze Age Pervert or Moldbug, are synergizing with contemporary feminism and overheating the cathedral. Some people think that this documentary is going to ruin my credibility as an academic, but they don't realize that we've already crossed the Rubicon. Academics' credibility is already irrevocably, completely destroyed. And they've destroyed it themselves. I've destroyed it myself. Academia no longer has the mechanisms at its disposal to produce and sustain its own truth system, its own reality system. It used to, but it doesn't anymore. I have found the people who now have those mechanisms. I have uncovered how they're doing it. And as an academic, it behooves me. No, it is incumbent upon me to share that with my colleagues, to share that with everyone. We need to make this technology open source. That's what I believe. The only question that remains is, who's doing all of this? Who's pulling the strings? At first, as I said, I thought that it might have been Moldbug. But this analysis shows that it's not Moldbug. This analysis shows who Moldbug's true master is. He never says this because he insists that he's an atheist. But if we review what we have found in this study, clearly Goldbug's master is the one true Catholic God. And so what we now see is that the union between feminists and Moldbug and Bronze Age Pervert, neither of them know exactly what they're doing, but they're all doing God's work, basically. You can call it whatever you want. God, non, spirit, whatever. You can even call it progress, or you can call it decline. Moldbug does see himself as God's warrior, I do believe. He's just very coy about this because, again, he knows that this would slot him into a low-status memeplex. I found in one of his articles where he refers to genius computer scientists as literal warriors of God. So basically, there is an ongoing Jacobite rebellion in which the hand of the one true Catholic God is operating equally through Moldbug and Bronze Age Pervert and other similar scandalous right-wing figures and contemporary feminist progressive journalists who are disproportionately women. They think they're doing something different, but they're really doing the same thing together, which is accelerating the breakdown of the contemporary political reality and fomenting patchwork.